All right, so here I am back again. I will repeat it all for those who didn't hear. There wasn't too much there, except for it is important to note that this is the first ever Global Dose Day. This was inspired in a meditation that I did just 10 days ago while I was reflecting on the power and the resurgence of the divine feminine. It is not a coincidence in my mind that the life of Maria Sabina, the birth of Maria Sabina, rather coincides with the feast day of Mary Magdalene. That is why Maria Sabina's full name is Maria Sabina Magdalena Garcia, rather. Now, what I shared that I think is important, and I want to reiterate two things. My wife and I started the world's first psilocybin mushroom wellness retreat in 2013 in Treasure Beach, Jamaica. We ran that for 7 years, and we found through that work two different things. One, that community is the missing piece. Community is what this world needs, especially when it comes to working with sacred mushrooms. This is how we have always used these sacred plants, is in community. There is fortunately, a push for psychedelic wellness growing in the US and other countries. And yet there is a huge component that is missing out that will truly contribute to lasting wellness, lasting growth through the use of these consciousness expanding plants and fungi. Community is central to this work. That is why, after leaving our retreats in Jamaica, where we saw so much benefit, we formed Psanctuary Church. This is a sacred mushroom church. And if anything that I shared today resonates with you, then I would invite you to check out sanctuary.org. We have a community of practitioners from around the U.S. and some from across the world who come together in community for support and encouragement with their own personal practice with sacred mushrooms. The other component that I think is really interesting and really important to share with this work and on this day is that over the years, something that I have witnessed countless times is that there is absolutely a component to the resurgence in psychedelics that is grounded and centered in the resurgence, the revitalization of the sacred feminine. This is central to the work that I do personally. And I think as time goes on, actually, I feel very confident as time goes on, we will see that this divine feminine is a crucial point of focus in working with these sacraments. And I know for some of you right now, that might sound a little woo-woo, and that is a-okay. I have been a staunch skeptic all of my life. And I continue to see time and time again that this is what we're seeing. So with that, we are launching the world's first Global Dose Day. The hope is that this will not be the last. Every year on this day, we have an opportunity to center around the legacy, the life of Maria Sabina, who without her, it is highly likely that we would not know anything about psilocybin mushrooms. Or if we did, we'd be much further behind where we are in our current progress, because it is she who, at the instruction of her own personal experience with these mushrooms, brought them to the wider world. So I am so happy to share this short presentation with you today. I did share a link out on my socials where you can join the conversation. I know there is a chat here where I can add that in. Where'd it go? Oh, there it is. Let me just post that in the chat here real quick. And so when I get done with this pretty short presentation, you will be able to join the conversation if you like. So the link takes you to a Restream event, not the viewing event. All right. Like I said, y'all, this is my first one. It might not go perfectly smoothly. I have done this with almost no administrative help, which is not my forte. So I am going to take any mistakes in stride and ask for your forgiveness. Next year, we will have more time to plan this and we'll do it bigger and better. I feel very confident in that. Anyway, the sole purpose of this, well, not the sole purpose, the purposes of this event is to honor the life and legacy of Maria Sabina and all practitioners who have helped to lead the way in normalizing and legitimizing psilocybin. And the other purpose is to uplift global consciousness. These plants, these fungi, we know well by now that is what they do best. They expand our awareness. They expand our consciousness. And my goal here is to expand our awareness to this role of the divine feminine and to expand the consciousness of the planet entirely. All right. So with that, I'm going to jump through our PowerPoint here. And if you are able to join the conversation when we get through, that would be amazing. And if not, then this will just be a one-off event that we improve every year from here on out. All right. So first thing I got to say here is some legal, responsible things. Now, I have a tendency to just follow my inspiration and do the thing that comes to mind. And as I dug into this a little bit, I did find out that if Eric Osborne was the one promoting Dose Day worldwide, then that actually creates some legal liability here. So I am not encouraging you to dose psilocybin mushrooms today, but I'm certainly not discouraging you. And I will be dosing psilocybin mushrooms today. Not a very high dose because I am on vacation with other families, but I will have a communion nonetheless so that I can feel the spirit of these sacred mushrooms. And I do so in reverence, and I encourage you to do that as well. If you choose of your own volition and your own personal responsibility to consume sacred mushrooms, then I would encourage that to always be an act of reverence. Even if you are in a more playful environment, recreation, recreation deserves reverence. It is a sacred act. So also with that, you know the drill. This is not medical advice. Anything that I'm sharing with you is in the desire to assist with harm reduction and to help expand your practice. All right, get that out of the way, and let's get into the real material here. All right, so first of all, it is always central in my practice to begin and end with gratitude. We have so much in our lives to be grateful for. I feel so personally grateful today for the life of Maria Sabina, and I have here some words of hers. So today we gather in celebration of the life and the work of a woman who, without intentional attention, may fade into the background of the history that she helped write. I will do my best to ensure that doesn't happen. It is her devotion to the sacrament of sacred mushrooms that we seek to bring awareness to and also revive for a modern world. Again, I'm so thankful for the clinical work that's being done with psilocybin mushrooms that ultimately proves they are a powerful sacrament and ultimately validates the words of Maria Sabina that we will explore here briefly. The mushroom sanctuary receives as a communion were kept alive through centuries of colonization, prohibition, and silence by indigenous people. Among them, and most predominantly, were the Mazatec of Oaxaca, and by Maria Sabina, who paid dearly for the world's attention. Though that they may have therapeutic value, they are so much more than that. They are, as Maria Sabina taught us, little saints, gifts of our Creator. So I'll explore some words here from Maria Sabina. Now, as I have explored and dug into the life of her, I have found that so much of the words that we find attributed to her are not actually hers. It's important to note that she was Mazatec and spoke that language. And so anything that we have access to in English is obviously translated and is perhaps not exactly to the word. So I just want to recognize that. And I also want to recognize that there are a lot of things out there attributed to her that are not actually hers. As a matter of fact, I just a few days ago found out that this shirt, there's a poem that's online, Heal Yourself, that is supposedly attributed to Maria Sabina, and it is not actually her words. So these I do know are, and I will read them here. She says, I don't know what year I was born, but my mother, Maria Conception, told me that it was the morning of the day they celebrate the Virgin Magdalene there in Rio Santiago, an agencia of Huatla. None of my ancestors knew their age. Speaking of the mushrooms, she says, there is a world beyond ours, a world that is far away, nearby, and invisible. And there is where God lives, where the dead live, the spirits and the saints, a world where everything has already happened and everything is known. That world talks. It has a language of its own. I report what it says. The sacred mushroom takes me by the hand and brings me to the world where everything is known. It is they, the sacred mushrooms, that speak in a way that I can understand. I ask them, and they answer me. When I return from the trip that I have taken with them, I tell what they have told me and what they have shown me. The saint children heal. They lower fevers, cure colds, and give freedom from toothaches. They pull the evil spirits out of the body or free the spirit of the sick. The sickness comes out if the sick vomit. They vomit the sickness. They vomit because the mushrooms want them to. And as we get further down in the historical line, I'm going to make a pretty strong effort not to put a whole lot of focus on Gordon Wasson today, because though he is the one who introduced Maria Sabina to the world, he is also the one that got most of the credit for what Maria Sabina shared. In terms of Wasson, who she had a long-lasting relationship with, she said, before Wasson, no one took the children simply to find God. They were always taken to cure the sick. Some of these young people sought me out for me to stay up with the little ones who spring forth. We come in search of God, they said. But from the moment the foreigners arrived to search for God, the saint children lost their purity. They lost their force. The foreigners spoiled them. From now on, they won't be any good. There is no remedy for it. Now, in the classes that I've taught at Psanctuary, I have focused in on this statement of Maria Sabina's pretty heavily. I personally feel like it is important that we recognize that every human being is flawed. I do not uphold Maria Sabina as a perfect human being, flawless. And I think that what we are seeing with the resurgence of psilocybin illustrates both the truth and some of the mistakenness in her words. There is a very valuable point being made here about the loss of purity of the sacred mushrooms. I have been a psilocybin cultivator for many, many years, and I've grown many, many strains of mushrooms. And every time I hear the strain penis envy or Jedi mindfuck, I ask myself, where is the sacredness here? Where is the purity here? Now, this is not to criticize. This is to elicit some questioning. That is what the mushrooms do so well, is they have us question the nature of our understanding and the nature of our relationship with reality. And while there is great value in greater accessibility to psilocybin, there is also great value in considering how do we maintain and ensure that this is kept sacred. We've all seen this with cannabis. We've seen the cannabis industry go from what it originated as. The Rastas were the ones who actually brought cannabis into the U.S. in large scale. Even the culture in the 60s and 70s was largely attributed to the likes of Bob Marley and Peter Tosh and such, who treated cannabis as a sacrament. And now we see cannabis treated in a very unsacred way, to the point where it's actually causing significant harm. And I know that brings up some dispute from others, but I've personally seen it in myself and many others as well. And I do believe that there is the potential for the same direction with sacred mushrooms. Maria Sabina points out that people ate the mushrooms not just to find God, but to help cure the sick. To my knowledge, I have hardly ever heard anyone talk about the physiological healing that can come from the use of sacred mushrooms. And yet I have seen it over and over myself. We're beginning to treat them like a psychological medicine when they are so much more than that. So I don't believe that the mushrooms are no good. I don't believe that they've lost their power and that there's no remedy for it. But I believe that we have to take that power back. We have to maintain the sacredness, the sanctity of this work, even if it's done in a joyful way. Again, I believe very strongly that playfulness is very healing. And so the blurring of lines between what is recreation and what is therapy and what is spiritual happens very easily. And it is our intention that really drives the direction of the work that we do. In her chants here, so we'll talk a little bit about the Veletas later on, but these are some words of some of her chants. I'm a woman wise in medicine, a woman wise in herbs, a woman wise in words, a woman wise in problems. I'm a woman of light. I'm a woman of the day. I'm a shooting star woman. Says I am a trumpet woman. I'm a drum woman. I'm a woman violinist because I'm a woman of letters, because I am a book woman. I'm a woman who flies. I am the woman book that is beneath the water. Quite a bit of paradox there, very poetic language. If you were to listen to the Veletas, you would find it to be enchanting indeed. And paradox is central in the work that happens with sacred mushrooms. So moving on a little bit more onto her in some specifics. Her all-night ceremonies were sung, not spoken. She called the mushrooms Los Niños Santos, the holy children. She was a healer first and foremost, and always through her life. That was her devotion. Like other curanderos and curanderas in the area, she used the medicine to diagnose and mend, not for pleasure, not for spectacle, but for the sick who came to her door. The story of how Maria Sabina first began working with sacred mushrooms as a healer, as I have read on multiple accounts, and again, recognizing that it's hard to necessarily document the exact truth, but what I have read from multiple sources that claim to have been her words spoken was that when Maria Sabina was 8 or so years old, she and her cousin, I believe, found some sacred mushrooms in the forest where they were playing. And knowing what they were, they ate the mushrooms. Their aunt then found them laughing and clearly under the influence of the mushrooms and reprimanded them for using them in a non-sacred way. But when Maria Sabina consumed those mushrooms at the age of 8, according to her, again, from my understanding, the mushrooms told her if she ever needed to cure someone to come back to her and they would help. Now, many years later, when she was a teenager, Maria Sabina's uncle was deathly ill. And many practitioners had attempted to heal him and none had been successful. And she remembered this message from the mushrooms, went out and found them on her own, consumed them on her own, and was given the answer that would heal her uncle. And that is how she was ultimately catalyzed into being the most renowned mushroom healer in her area. Many years passed, and she was discovered, or uncovered, I should say, by Gordon Wasson. Most people know that story. He spent several years trying to gain access to the ceremonies. eventually telling a lie to Maria Sabina once he found her about why he wanted to use the mushrooms. That is not often pointed out in the modern ethnomycological history. Gordon Wasson lied to Maria Sabina, saying that his son was lost and he was worried about him because he knew that one of the primary uses of psychedelic mushrooms was for finding lost items or people. So she eventually allowed him into a ceremony, and he reported his experience in Life magazine. That article, he was paid the equivalent to, at that time, he was paid 60,000 US for, which now would be who knows what. Maria Sabina made nothing. He did attempt to anonymize her in the article, and yet she was eventually found, and her village was found, and that is how foreigners came in and got access to these mushrooms. Eventually, Albert Hoffman gained access to samples of psilocybin mushrooms and synthesized psilocybin, and that's how it made its way into the laboratory. Maria Sabina died in destitution. She lost her home. Her son was murdered. Her home was burned. Her entire village basically turned on her because they believed that she alone had been what allowed the foreigners in and had desecrated their village and the sacred mushrooms. Now, I think this is a tragic story of a woman who sought to do good, and who, in her heart and through her own prayers and meditation, came to believe that it was time to reveal these sacred mushrooms to the wider world. And again, I believe this is a huge part of our responsibility to Maria Sabina and to these sacred mushrooms, that we do not continue to desecrate them. That will always happen, of course, but that more and more people really understand that these mushrooms are a sacrament and that we can regain some of the purity that was lost. Now, just a little touch on the area where Maria Sabina lived. I have never been there. I've never had the opportunity to. I would love to. It is the Sierra Mazateca. It's the highlands in central Mexico. It's referred to as a cloud forest. It is in the Oaxacan highlands, wet, green, and cold at night. This isn't just a backdrop or a stage setting. This is where a culture obviously still lives, but for thousands of years, where this quiet, very private culture shepherded this sacrament. When the conquistadors came into Central America and found the Mayan using what they called Teonanacatl, which translates into God's flesh. When the Catholic conquistadors came in there and found that, that just wouldn't do. There wouldn't be any competition for God's flesh, when that is the same thing that those Christians did and still do call their sacrament. And so the use of sacred mushrooms, flesh of God at that time, was driven underground and eventually became overlaid with Catholic ritual in an effort to hide it in plain sight. This is how these mushrooms were carried to us through many, many hundreds of years. And if were it not for these faithful practitioners who hid that practice, buried it under Catholic iconography and ideology, we would likely not have these mushrooms available to us today. So this is not a myth. This is not some, far out story. This is a living history. It is deserving of understanding, respect, and it's also why today the curanderos and curanderos still pray to Jesus and the Virgin Mary and the saints. So while there is, I think, relevant conversation about appropriation, I think it's also relevant to acknowledge that these mushrooms have the practice has morphed quite a bit over history for various reasons. And so while we now today have regular access to mushrooms that originally in this area were only accessible during the rainy season, we have an even greater responsibility to remember where they came from and to shepherd them wisely. Now, I think it is beautiful, as I said from the outset, and I personally don't believe in coincidence. I've seen too much that indicates to me that there is an intelligence behind everything that is unfolding. And I think it is beautiful to note that on this day of Maria Sabina's birthday is also the feast day of Mary Magdalene. Now, Mary Magdalene is another woman who has suffered the ills of history. Her name and story has been distorted to the point where there is very little truth actually known about her, very similar with Maria Sabina. Mary Magdalene, in more contemporary, or perhaps I should say a deeper, older understanding of who this person was, is contemporarily being seen as a contemporary, if not a spouse of who we know as Jesus Christ. Now, I'm not here to argue or debate that. I have read multiple books that historically point to that as truth. And I think it is certainly worth exploring. It is very apparent that the feminine aspect of creation has been demonized in our world. We have the biblical story of Adam and Eve that obviously points to the woman as the origin of sin. And yet the great interesting irony is that if you explore this story from traditions prior to the Judeo-Christian text, and they exist, the same, almost exact same story, except in those stories, the serpent and the woman are the truth speakers. So there is some very interesting evidence that at some point things got flipped on their head and we have a complete misrepresentation. If you're interested in exploring that further, this coming Sunday on Sanctuary's Sunday service there, which is open to the public, it's a Zoom service where people come and explore sacred text and enjoy conversation together. I will be reading from the Magdalene Mysteries, a text that is also quoted to some extent here in this presentation. Excuse me, on the next slide. And we will explore the history of the sacred feminine back into Sumerian times, where the feminine, the divine feminine, was positively associated with the cosmic serpent. So it's beautiful that it is on this same day, and it felt important that I speak directly to that in this presentation. Maria Sabina acknowledged that was the origin of her birth name. And as time comes, I will maybe share some more deeper reflections and insights into the relevancy of Maria Sabina as she relates to Mary Magdalene today. I'm going to read just a little bit from some excerpts from this Magdalene Mysteries, just to share that with you all, because again, I think there's value here. It says, Mary Magdalene is the embodiment of the divine feminine made manifest. She is the living presence of the Christ in form, the one who walked with Jesus as his equal, his beloved, his priestess, and the one whom he entrusted the deepest mysteries. And even in the Judeo-Christian Bible, Mary Magdalene is referred to as the apostle of the apostles, the closest to Jesus, who had privileged knowledge that she only shared with him. Sarah and Bertrand says in her book, Mary Magdalene is the feminine Christ. She is the other side of the one life, the divine feminine reflection of the divine masculine. Together they are christened two, the sacred balance restored in love. Mary Magdalene carried the grail, not a cup of gold, but the living vessel of the divine feminine. She holds the wisdom of the womb that gives birth to the illumination, the love that redeems, and the power that awakens. The world was not ready for the union of the feminine and masculine made flesh, so they erased her, silenced her, and hurried and buried her truth. Mary Magdalene stands for all women who have been worshipped and betrayed, visible and invisible, honored and forgotten. She is the remembrance of the divine self. And that is where this story, this persona, relates to the life of Maria Sabina, who, for all intents and purposes in our psychedelic renaissance, has been almost made completely invisible, who has been forgotten as little more than a myth. Mary Magdalene calls to us to remember who we are, beloved, powerful, radiant, whole. She is not of the past. She is the rising consciousness of the new world. I feel that so deeply in my bones, is why it was so important to share this. And lastly, the feminine Christ is the rebalancing of creation. It is the return of divine love embodied. Mary Magdalene represents the awakened heart of humanity, the remembrance that love is our true nature and that the sacred is within. She is the priestess of the rose lineage, the resurrection, the keeper of the mysteries of life, death, and resurrection. Through her, we remember the power of devotion, the truth of relationship, and the power of inner union. To walk with Mary Magdalene is to walk the path of the heart, to heal the wounds of exile, and to restore the sacred marriage within. And I want to really express that this is not solely for the women. This is for all of us. We all have these components within ourselves, and we are at a time that is bringing balance. And we have the beautiful opportunity to consciously engage with that. And I believe that is so much what the holy children, the little saints, and the sacred mushrooms are really here to do. Not all, but that is a huge, huge part. So here we have highlighted the mushrooms themselves. Now, there are over 200 species of psilocybin containing mushrooms. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but these are some of the top 6 or so here. Cubensis is the one that is known most widely. There are well over 200 strains of cubensis. So when you hear B+, Amazon, Aztec, Hawaiian, all of those others, even the mutated versions like Enigma or so many of the other ones that are out there now, it is really just a mutated version of Psilocybe cubensis. They are beautiful little mushrooms, but in the shamanic culture, they were the lesser of all sacred mushrooms. We have next Psilocybe ovoidiosa stidiata. This, for those who are in the Midwest, this is a relatively newly discovered psilocybin mushroom that grows, as you can see here, in some pretty massive clusters in wood debris. They originate in creek beds and river overflows, but they have now adapted into mulch beds and can be found in parks and playgrounds all across the Ohio River Valley, and much wider. They're actually being found in the Pacific Northwest as well now. In the spring, they are about 1.5 times as potent as cubensis and are currently my favorite mushroom to consume. We have Psilocybe cyanescens. This is another wood-loving mushroom. This mushroom does deserve some extra care because with it there have been significant reportings of wood lovers paralysis, it's called. There's some interesting research that suggests that arises because of their tendency to grow under rhododendrons and their uptaking of some of the toxic compounds in those plants. They are relatively potent and are pretty localized to the Pacific Northwest, as is Psilocybe azurescens. Psilocybe azurescens is the most potent psilocybin mushroom. It is about 4 times as potent as cubensis, from what I have been told. I've never had the good fortune of bioassaying them myself. They are native to grasslands and dunes along the sea coast in the Pacific Northwest. Psilocybe semilensiata is also known as the Liberty Cap. This is a widespread grassland mushroom in Europe and some reports of the northern United States. And then Psilocybe caryolescens, this is the premier mushroom of the Mesoamerican mushroom shamans. I believe the indigenous name for this mushroom is Darumbe, the landslide mushroom, because they appear after landslides. And one of the things that we've lost in our relationship with sacred mushroom is that they are not all created equal. All of the different mushrooms in the shamanic cultures have different applications. Psilocybe cubensis, or San Isidro as it's often called, is the worker's mushroom from what I have read, and it has been used for a discerning life path. Caryolescens is more towards physiological healing. Psilocybe mexicana is one that's in some ways similar to semilensiata, but it grows in a different space. Is also used indigenously. Those are known as los perejitos, and they are more used for spiritual divination, I believe. Again, like all of this, I consider myself still very much a baby to this world. We have lost so much knowledge and wisdom and understanding of these sacred plants. We think in our culture, we think that we run some lab tests and we have a basic understanding of the chemical nature of a mushroom, and all of a sudden that we are experts on it. And after 27 years of consuming and administering these mushrooms, I can tell you that is the farthest from the truth. And it is very wise for us to maintain humility when working with these mushrooms and stay open to relearning wisdom that has been lost through direct experience and through working together to better understand the nature of this sacrament. And so just a word about Psanctuary again. Psanctuary does treat these mushrooms as a sacrament, and that is how we are able to use them and not be prosecuted. I have been arrested for psilocybin mushrooms in 2015. I learned a lot from that experience. And in the last 5, almost 6 years now, we have applied so much of what we learned to the formation of this church. I believe it is not only the truest and most appropriate way to work with these mushrooms, but it is the most accessible way as well, which is very important. The world needs this healing right now. The world needs sacred mushrooms, and we neither have time nor really have a lot of need to sit around and wait for research to prove that they are safe. To even consider that they are not safe is to disregard the thousands of years of indigenous knowledge. So we do not treat these mushrooms as drugs. We do not treat them recreationally, even though we are open to our ceremonies being enjoyable. We understand this as a communion, and that's how we treat it publicly. That's how we speak to it, and that is what provides our religious protection. We are a sincere community that treats this as a sacrament, and it's really important that anyone who explores or comes close to Sanctuary understands that this is about your spiritual autonomy. No one is here to tell you how to take care of yourself. We are all learning together. This is a community, and community is how we learn and how we grow. All right. So now moving into really experiencing this day in an intentional and sacramental way. So I have laid out 2 ways of engaging with what we're calling dose day right now, and that is in actually consuming the sacrament. And again, that is up to your own volition. I'm not encouraging you to do anything. If you are a member of our church or another church, well, I can speak a little more freely there. This is your sacrament, and you have the right to commune with it when you see fit. Most folks are aware of microdosing. I personally believe that the term microdosing has a way of stripping the experience of its sacred nature. And so how we refer to it in our community is subtle sacrament. So when we work with our sacrament in a manner that only produces a subtle effect. But again, that's up to you and how you have your relationship with it. Then obviously there are the higher doses, the microdosing, which is profoundly different than microdosing or subtle sacrament work. And if you're not experienced with these mushrooms, then this is where I really encourage you to exercise caution and awareness, having intention, and perhaps even a space holder or a sitter with you who has a level of experience. And it also requires quite a bit more preparation and integration. Whenever the mushroom experience is done, that's when the real work actually begins. And then also there is a way to engage with this process and a way to engage with the spirit of the sacrament without even consuming it. I experienced this very deeply in my years of cultivation, and even today as I harvest wild psilocybin. Through meditation, contemplation, you are able to access that world that Maria Sabina spoke of. Now, I will continue to maintain that it's not the same. It will never be the same unless you are perhaps the most experienced yogi as working with the sacrament, but it is there. And we can also engage in this through study, through educating ourselves on the history of the sacred mushrooms, considering the lives of the individuals who help to, again, shepherd this medicine towards us today, and meeting with friends, sharing a circle, perhaps just being silent. I will never be one to tell you what is the way to practice reverence. Only you can know what that is. Sometimes the most reverent thing you can do is laugh to your heart's content. Sometimes the most reverent thing you can do is enjoy a meal with absolute fullness of gratitude. That is always going to be up to you when I'm reflecting on it. But now I would invite us to take a moment here just to be together consciously. And even if you are experiencing this as a recording, you're not live on the stream with us, you have the opportunity to take a moment and experience a moment as a sacrament, as an entryway into a deeper relationship with the divine. And so if you're here with me now, then I want to invite you to do that. I want to invite you to feel yourself in your body. If you aren't already barefoot, it might be a good time to kick off your shoes and just feel yourself touching the floor. If you're able to walk outside and touch the ground, to feel your breath enter your body. To feel the earth holding you. To feel the life buzzing around you. To become aware that whether you see them or not, stars are above your head, the sun and the moon around us. Being aware that we share this earth together. And that we have shared this earth with all of our ancestors. If you are a sacred mushroom practitioner, to be aware that there were countless others who came before you and carried the wisdom and knowledge of this sacrament further. And were it not for them, your practice would not exist. It wasn't the scientist. It wasn't the analyst. They have their place. They have their role. It was the human beings like you who tilled the earth, cared for their children, who loved their families, who had fears, ambitions, and that you are a part of that lineage. And when you commune with sacred mushrooms, when you cultivate these mushrooms, even when you speak of them, that you are carrying forth a lineage that is of the oldest in mankind. And perhaps in this moment, on this day, when the woman, the humble, quiet woman who would reveal these hidden sacred mushrooms to the world was born, to be in touch with her spirit. You don't have to know it. You don't have to hear her voice. You don't have to know what she looks like. Just in knowing that she existed, we can know her spirit. And with that, as our practice often is in working with our sacraments, I would invite you to set some intentions for this day, from this moment forward in this day. Not for something that you want to get out of this day. This is an important part of our work with the mushrooms and our ceremonies through our church. We ask our participants not to seek what they can get from their experiences, but what can they bring to their experience. I ask our members to consider what they bring into ceremony, because it is known that what we give, we receive. If we seek love, then we have to share it. If we seek wisdom and healing, we have to embody that. And with this intention, I invite you to send a desire outward into the world, uplifting our collective consciousness. Your thoughts, your energy, your words, they matter. They're alive. And where can you direct that energy today? Where can you share expanded awareness, higher consciousness? Perhaps it's in your immediate environment. Perhaps it's completely on the other side of the world. If this humble, simple woman, by sharing her gift with the world, can change your life, then you can change the lives of others. If your eyes were closed, I invite you to open them, come back into your body, and be aware of the space around you. Recognizing that, as the mushrooms teach us, often is only our perception that needs to change. And that's how we change the world, is by changing the way we see it. The greatest gift of the mushroom is that it reveals to us that we are the gift, that we have the divine spark within us. And we have the power and perhaps a responsibility to share that with the world. I want to share with you a few ways that we can take this work, so we can bring our gift into the world, that we can do good with our energy. First one is offering you the possibility that you can donate to a Mazatec community, that you can actually help with the rebuilding of a culture that in many ways was decimated by ours. I'm going to share in the chat just a link for those of you who might want to connect with one or more funds. These are two that I have vetted out for real impact they make on the area where they operate. One of them is a more of a mycological support, actually supporting study and conservation of fungi in the area, particularly sacred fungi. The other one is more directly related to the people in the area themselves. I want to invite you to, let's see, my numbers are off here a little bit. Let that go. I want to invite you to share and speak and participate, not just in this event. Obviously, that's of great value, but in sharing the knowledge. I'm only sharing with you what others have shared with me. And that is how we light candles around the world. Another great way to do that is by hosting a gathering. I don't necessarily mean a mushroom ceremony. That is entirely up to you and your own discretion. That is something that we do educate and encourage within our sanctuary community. But even if it's just to meet and have community, have discussion around sacred mushrooms and how we can perhaps engage with them in a more conscious way. And then the last is just, I want to invite you to be on the lookout for the book that I will be publishing. I had hoped it was going to be in September. It's maybe more like October, November at this point, because I want to make sure that it's really where it needs to be. The title of the book is The Psychedelic Reformation, Reclaiming the Sacrament Forgotten by the Renaissance, Reviving the Church for the Modern World. The premise of it is that the medicalization of psilocybin is of great detriment to the sacrament itself, and that one of the most important things that we can do, much like this presentation has been today, is to reclaim psilocybin mushrooms as a sacrament, not merely as a pharmaceutical or a medicine. And as Sanctuary is illustrating, and many other churches, Christian, Jewish, Buddhist temples, we are starting to see psilocybin incorporated into religious practice from various faith traditions. And I feel so confident that is the direction we are taking as a world, that we will see religions greatly modified, augmented by the use of sacred mushrooms. And then finally, as I always like to end on, I would love to end with some gratitude or perhaps sharing of what sacred mushrooms have helped you with. In the Facebook group, I've seen already a great number of comments from folks from around the world as to how psilocybin mushrooms are impacting their lives, from recovery from addiction. We had someone from the Ukraine speaking to mushrooms as a part of their ongoing recovery from the trauma that they experienced. There's so much that we can say here. And just how we want to carry this work forward and treat these little saints with the respect that they deserve. So if you're able to write that in the chat, I see that I'm not sure how this is working out there in social media land. It's I'm gonna, again, this is just the first of many, hopefully, and I'm going to allow it to be what it is. I'm just grateful to be here sharing this information and time with you. And so if you're not able to write in the chat or join in the conversation like I had hoped, then wherever you are listening to this, I want to invite you just to consider, in gratitude, how these mushrooms have helped you, and how can you honor the sacredness in this work and the legacy and life of Maria Sabina. How can you become more consciously engaged with the divine feminine? You are a part of the psychedelic reformation, whether you know it or not. No one has done this alone. Not Maria Sabina, not any of the individuals who have carried these sacraments forward. No one has done this alone. And work is far from finished. While we have had those who have carried these sacraments forward, the healers through conquest and prohibition, we recognize that there is still a long way to go. Maria Sabina may have opened the door, and now there are others who are walking through it, some with more care and sanctity than others. I'm offering you a moment to consider what is going to be your way, what's your approach. We are seeing decriminalization movements. We are seeing in churches coming up. We're seeing guides and scientists who are reclaiming sacrament. We are seeing this work being taken seriously. And for that, we have enormous gratitude. And for that, we want to see move into the realm of sovereignty. One of the greatest lessons of working with this sacrament is that you are your own healer. We are moving into a time where everyone must take authority over their own selves. You are sovereign. You are independent, and you are connected intimately and intricately with the rest of the world. And so our individual growth and healing is a responsibility to our entire human family. I encourage you to take that very seriously. I want to thank you all for joining me today. I want to request that perhaps you share this presentation for someone who has not considered the deeper nature of sacred mushrooms. These are not our mushrooms. We do not own them any more than we own the land that we sit on. These are gifts to us from our Creator. These are passed down to us through generation after generation. It is my hope that in my work can be worthy of the multitude of blessings that it has gifted upon me. And is my confidence that if you walk this path, then you too will find many, many blessings. Yes, there will be difficulty. There will be resistance. And there will be joy and liberation like you may have never known before. Thank you so much, you all, for joining me. I see your comment there, Jeremy. Thank you. I appreciate you. Yes, these sacred mushrooms, I'm so glad to hear they've changed your life and so many others. I have had the incredible blessing of witnessing thousands of lives changed by these mushrooms. And that is why I cannot present them as a mundane medicine. They are absolutely a sacrament. Thank you all for joining me. I hope to see you around on any of the platforms, social media, or perhaps Psanctuary if you choose to join us there. It has been a pleasure sharing this time with you today. And if you choose to imbibe with the sacred mushrooms today, then may it be a wonderful experience. So I'm sure you'll get whatever you need. Thank you all so much. Till the next time.